다 되려야 다다리 다 대제메 군주스 다다 대제메 군주 팀 숨바 다 대지 초도 네 드리지 디토리아 지당게 다간다 가주에 지 저진이 주마 창으로 나르다 면접에 다 가주래 지 다 뽑았으나도 야나지 장그장에 이치를 니지 다지 수수지 죄사를 써서 되지 뽑아놓지 닉즈 뽑아 전부 중요해 되게 하다 넘규 메시지 오시다 좋으셔 다들 하나 가보시다 좋소 가르스타는 최대 지딩이 정확한 주베 이미능이야 수술이야 딩쇠를 뽑아를 가라간 섬이지 매비미나 아니 정확한 주도해야 돼 가봅시다 제가 디균선대는 드리지 상매지 나다면 지 딩쇠 딩다 뽑아 다른 수술한 거랑이지 강배강이야 수술랑 토야 그 이체는지 얘도 제자한테 가봅시다 좋스 제자 그냥 참로리야 다 인지결이야 congratulations 다 벽에는 가라라다디 다비 영문에 다 가수에 저시들도 수양이
We're having the third Arya Chema Winter Dharma gathering, and as I look out, I see that all of the nuns have a confidence that they did not have before. You've all gained confidence, a belief in yourself, and a confidence that you are able to do things and that you are capable. And I see the expressions of this, and I'm very happy to see this. The reason for this is because no matter what we're doing, whether it be the Dharma or whether it be something worldly, if we first of all do not have the confidence in ourselves, then it's difficult for us to actually get anything done, no matter what it might be. And so to see that you have that confidence, that courage and confidence, that self-confidence that you did not have before, and that belief that you actually can get things done is really wonderful. I'm very happy to see it, and I'd like to congratulate you all.
And 저기 지당게 지 주면 소리야 들지기 다 딘수에도 뽑아를 녀야래야 두지 마무지 고요 어레 삼정도 봐 대래한다 고겐스 말베 고겐스나도 파르제 대래나 마부 요래 요래 벤차샤비입니다. 다지 사게 샤게 겨샤게도 베덴발이야. 봄에 로드 중한데 데네 상게 데모 롱압자 지바 상게 데모 롱압자 냠바 레스 저기 딱 계지 신년 용디요 안에 세상에 들이 세상 디균zel 때는 디스 가수다 간다 지토한 디즈지 심슈 파당 어느지 뽑아게야랴 고겐 파르제를 멈시다 체대요 아래 제상 다른 데지 뽑아당 딘스 데지 녀야디 레라브지만인바 아 참에 하고 된세르 심이 주사는 참에 텔리아 지 가수다지 데지 뽑아도 딘스 녀야디你高也不记得，你高能行得了，人堂条件比，这人情话的开始不是大意思了，跟其实没，主要不看的。 Yeah, that candy.
Candy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I had thought initially that it might take a long time to develop that self-confidence, that for the nuns to develop such self-confidence. And the reason is because there's so many impediments and so many obstacles, difficulties to be faced. As you all know, there are many people who say such things as that the teachings of the Shakyamuni Buddha will be diminished or decreased, or the duration of the teachings will be decreased by 500 years if women are ordained and so forth. And in any case, there are many impediments, many things that get in the way of increasing our enthusiasm and increasing the confidence. And so it's not easy to develop such confidence and enthusiasm. It's not an easy thing to find, as you all know. So I think it's important to recognize now how difficult it is to find such confidence and how much value it has.
Kung Sanandado, that Lungi Jabde, that this are Lungi Jabde, Mab the Marte with a 7-star ranch, Lungi Jabde, 7 digit Rayo Mare. Nina Azut da Nanire da Chilugi Chilutana Nanire, Nidon Jengelonia. Chera Shenzu, Chera Sheba Chimbusa Jura, Chera Sheba Chimbusadi, Denju di, da Denju be Kijen Chadi ore. Around the Tundama, she's Shediak. Chera now, Dodeba, Umaba, Simzamba, Simzamba, Umaba Shediaki, Chera now Sadi, that Santoadi. Kachili Tamji Yuna, Tizugi, energy Chedamawe, Shung, Sherad Sheba Chimbusagi, Shung, that Chudi Nanche, that D General Jason Danchene, and today looks Sumba in Dusane, D Gunzel Dene, Chedana was. Chedana was talk by Gunzendi, Cherado Sheba Chimbugi, Shung Teladene Chung de Regime, Savage Jazan. Chirasheba Chembusa de Big Shung, the Naruki, Nambegi Shulu, that Kajan Chadi on it.
Now, in the past, I've discussed about this issue or given an explanation of why it is said that the duration of the teachings will be decreased by 500 years. From one aspect, if we look at it from one aspect, the reasons are not all that clear. It's like it's hard to find a good source, a good scriptural citation. There are, of course, a few, but they are not all that clear. But last year, that is in the last Western year, in 2015, we began looking in detail at a text called the collection of the Great Exposition. And this is a very important treatise. Now, as you know, in Tibetan Buddhism, we talk about there being 4 philosophical schools: the Exposition School, or Vaibhashika, the Sutra, or Sautrantika, Mind-only, or Chittamatra, and the Middle Way, or Madhyamaka. And so the first of these is the Exposition School. And the reason it is given that name, the Exposition School, is that the great masters of the Sarvastivada school in Kashmir gathered all of the texts of the exposition into a great exposition, and then they followed this as the basis of their philosophical school. And so they were given the name, their name was given based upon the name of that text. So they're called the Great Exposition, based on the name of the text, the Great Exposition. And so for that reason, their name is given based, the name of the school is given based upon the name of that text, which one is one of the most important ancient Buddhist philosophical texts.
Chiradu Shiava Chimbudi, Ar Pegetola, Mevre, Uma Pegetola, Yomare. Tembangadar Gole, Mevre, Tembachidar Gole, Mevre. Yana Getolia, Chira Shinju, Chiradu Shiava Chimbudi, the Jurmara Sum Yondiare. The Geshuti, Robin, the Tangi Denisuba, Shenzangi. Gyurshav deda pambu niga yede bishara da di geshu de simta shema de yande ta kanda gyurmu da sum yare da di chi su da ngobju jigdong gubje shibju shirana demde shibju ngobju da jiliya azu jaye ge lobe cheba da di da fazun sidoa da cheba sidoa kon di bige pajin dibun liya lobjo na metro Jibun this lobjong na chichen. Kanda kongi gege tone pege tole ju gyurje. Da kanda 진지 pege tole ya. Da 반복하셔야지. 링네서지 qabliya 반복하셔야지. 볼라침래. 마도다 망쳐야 돼. 다 하려.
Now this text,
Venerable Fazun.
Now this text, the great, the treatise of the Great Exposition, was not previously translated into Tibet. It was not translated during the ancient translation school, during the ancient translation period, nor during the later translation period. But it was translated into Chinese. There are actually 3 translations of it in Chinese. The longest of these translations is one that was prepared by the great 8th century translator Xinsang. It's about 200 fascicles, or 200 bundles of text. But there are 3 different translations. Now in modern times, it was sometime in maybe the 1940s or 1950s, there was a Chinese monk named the Venerable Fazun, who studied probably at Drepung Monastery. And he, on his own, translated this text from Chinese into Tibetan. Now, there are probably some portions of this that were lost during the Cultural Revolution, but most of the text remains. At that time, there was a great scholar named Deba Tongpen at Drepung. Some people say that it was he who translated the text, but it probably wasn't. But he certainly was was very learned and assisted with the translation.
Tadi karasana di chara shenzu di zanggo yunzen di sangi gibe ndo nalo le ka nalo le ji misewa de ji seba sa da yang ji tobatism ri chong di zu le ji ti rondo se ar di je do je di na chuwa ji le ya re chuwa de karasana sangi de ba ane lo tong du ne ge de be ne se de lo tong du ne ge so ya ba lo tong du ne ge yu che 다 보면 여러분들 중앙에 때네 롱압제 드브레스 거스 제가 다 롱압제만 내고 말다 로동 난 롱압제 텐샤나 다 롱압제만 내가 말아. 롱압제만 내가 말았어. 이나야 다 제라 신주디 상계 양해를 되는 로 두개 제수 중부지. 로 두개 제수. 다로 두개 제나 상계 때문에 내려 봐다. 상계 때문에 내려 두산 다한테 가르랬다. 상계 때문에 롱압제 로 치동만 내가 말았어. 동다직만 내가 말을 나와. 디나나 롱압제네. 안다 보면라도 중앙을 되네. 롱압제 매우 차서었어. 다 이내 상계 때문에 다다 내들 때 가르랬다. 이 상계 두스마 롱 치동만 내가 말해. 디나네 압제네 매우 차서래. 다 단도 상계 때문에 내도 와서. 그래서 다디 룽덴데 베디 다 계절부터 봐 도도를 시에는 봐 룽덴데 따다 되를 유서 말았다. 룽덴데 따다나 되를 유서 말았어. 근데 이제 좋아지든지 렌샤.
Now, in this text, there is one passage where they discuss a doubt or a problem. And the reason for this is that basically this text takes many of the points that are not clear in the sutras and the words of the Buddha and tries to make them clear, tries to summarize everything. And it asks many questions. Among them, one question it asks is it says, the Buddha predicted a prophecy that his teachings would remain for 1,000 years. But then he later said that if women were ordained, that the duration of the teachings would be decreased by 100 years. So that would mean that the teachings would only remain for 500 years total, because if you have 1,000 years and you subtract 500 from that, you only have 500 left for the teachings to remain. And yet this treatise, the presentation of the Great Exposition, was written 600 years after the Buddha passed into nirvana. Even though it was written 600 years later, the teachings were still extant. The teachings remained. So why is that? If the teachings were only supposed to say 1,000 years, and then then their duration was decreased for 500 years because of women being ordained, how is it that even longer, more than 500 years later, that the teachings were still present? So basically, what this is saying is that the prophecy is not accurate, and so this is the question that it poses.
다들 도박 공론도 보시면다. 대 좋아대 도박 공론도 보시. 그래서 미신다지 지유나면 다간다 도박인지 좋네. 다들 랜디 나머 랜니도 랜미라니 다 찍디 랜찍 당보대 가라했잖아. 다 상계 때문에 로똥도 롱하게 드버레사디 가와 고고랬잖아. 넘버 2기 다지 롱하게 드버레스다. 가르쳐서나 다좀에 드부토야. 다지 디빌리우스야들 주도와 디빌리우스야지 자점에 공방 토야기 딱 간다지 가서지 근데 다 리우스란다도 다 세션도 디베 조벌이야 근데지 공부했다 넘버 2 디부 넘버 2 디부 넘버 2 템바 가서 디벌 공부해서 찍도 방법이 다 니버디 가라서 니버디 너니 오망해지 쉬비인데던 라고를 차샤 니버드 가라도스나 부메럽도 중앙라 때네 리사데 가라스나 부메래 지위 최계사죠와 부메럽도 중앙에 걸이야 지위 최계사지 상계기 계랭고 예소다 다 지위 최기 계랭바 이나 누구 말했어 지위 최기 계랭바 인자 디비어 말했다 지위 최기 기시 급디도 계랭메나 dimdures 제가 디균전데 디강에데 요 말했다 간다 다디 따다 되려 다들 집시 다다도 나도도 다간다 상계 템바 롱압전 디요 말했어 나도도 다 넘버 2 디부션에 다도 지위지 계레마 시에나 다간다 로 아체데 디비요 말했어 나 단 디비요레서 가와 공부했으나 찍디 넘버 2 디부 넘버 2 템바 디발로 공부체 찍디 지위 최기 개 말레나 다 시다 가르르다지 넘버 2 케 말렘바 시나 스타 간다 가르르다지 더 다 드니지 넘버 2 가서다 지위 최기 캐 말레나 기시 지위 캐 말레 소나 아니 다 년가요 알았어 드니지 임자
Now, in the text, it gives two responses. This question here is just raising the issue, and then there are two different responses to it. The first of these responses is that when it talks about the Buddha's teachings being, the duration of the Buddha's teachings being decreased for 500 years, what it means is not the general level of the teachings, according to this answer. Instead, it is the length, the period of liberation would be decreased by 500 years. That period of liberation, what we mean by that is there are said to be different phases of the Buddha's teachings, and so the phase when many people would achieve the level of arhat would be decreased by 500 years, and so we can call this the phase or the teachings of liberation. And so one answer is that this phase of the Buddha's teachings has been decreased by 500 years. The second answer, the second reply to this question is one that is similar to what I've said in the past. Now, when women were ordained, then initially ordained, then the Buddha told them that they needed to accept the eight respectful dharmas, and so the response is because women accepted the eight respectful dharmas, then the duration of the teachings was not decreased. If they had not accepted these eight respectful dharmas, then the duration would have decreased. But since they did, then the duration of the teachings has not been decreased. In any case, what we can say is that the duration of the Buddhist teachings has not been decreased by 500 years. And whether we say that this is because that was said in terms of the phase of liberation, or if we say it is because of the because of accepting the eight respectful dharmas, and therefore the teachings were not decreased. In any case, they have not decreased. And so when we talk about the teachings, the duration of the teachings being decreased by 500 years, then we're saying that it's either in case, then the answer this text gives is that it's either in case of either situation of the phase of liberation being shorter, or that there is a danger, if it were possible, that women would not have accepted the eight respectful dharmas.
Tati lungi gyabden kung zembro jeda sebashta jire sam dos tendi ye. Kara sana cheda sheba chembudi tang azu nyendu deba choge nanne. Tamji yebro mawe ta ji shung zawe gi shunglu ru chadi yare. Mainstream somewhere zawe shunglu ru dos chadi yare. Ta nyendu deba choge nalo ne ane ta deba targe chishu shugen chishu dadi tamji yunar chadi yare chezam di gyunzen dene ta di shunglu kezenji nalo le dos kyoye bin yuzane anda nga su sangwa lo chigi kashwe ta ngone des ji tizum se arabshi ta des lo de arabshi cha arabshi di chingure mashine kashwe ta 당연히 되시
Now, I think that this is a very clear scriptural, or a very clear scriptural support for this. And the reason for that is the text comes from the exposition school, which is a branch of the Sarvastivada schools, which is one of the 18 original schools of the Shravakas. Of the Shravaka schools. It is their basic, their fundamental treatise and text. And so among the 18 different schools, the most widespread and the most and the most influential was this Sarvastivada. And so since this text, the treatise on the Great Exposition, is their fundamental treatise, I think that this can really help us eliminate our doubts and have more confidence.
다들 뒤를 니즈집에 난래야 랑 상으로 단도에 지 저블링 토알이야 지 포초 모멘스 말 포초 규베인바 모멘바인바 이제 다와로 단도야 다 아달 지 갈라간점 쇼침부르지 단도야 요아래 다 상계 준딘데 겁래야 야 지소 나로래야 포쇼 모멘게 따왔으나 다 된대기디 유에베 시에만 오버지 좋았다 제가 참상 아주 여기 팀상 그 사무당당이 야지 사무당당으로 당지 야 상계기 뒤럽리야 사무당은 비슷한 디디스 적으면도 삼죠 가다 상기 준된데 겁리야 간다 이제 지소 내단으로 디디 재미 비슷하다 깔라가고 싶지 분명 다버지 상계기다 분명히 중앙에 겁지 뒤산에 지속 내단의 뒤미나 다들 깔래하고 싶지 내단을 차리유서 미참에지 다들 지금 말했어야지 니주지 드린 주산에 다 디균센데네 상계가 남산남사 당부 분명히 전화로 지지 기구다모 코르단시에 쉬베 걸려야 다 팅카시 쉬브레 켈레마나오르 산다 균제르 도삼르지 안 타마들이야 다 가는 군거위 휴시 균젠의 제리바 휴에 걸려야더니 신에 지가르에 지조 나노 이미네야 덴덴게 지가르다 다 규림도 지에베 토네 다 지조 나노 이미네 다 가다지 상계기디 분명히도 좀 나아디 그거 균젠의 제네 나와 이미지 가다 무슨 되어버지 조선 된데 돼야지다 된데지 제제 안다나지 집이 주기 개래 주야돼야 다 급디디 지속에 내다는 저게 되지 다디 임바디 고란 류안난 대비 세버지 버지 통도 섬도 그래도 안드린 주산 디균선 때네 급디디 주산은 상계에 다지 분명히 된래야 간다지 라바스um 용스 줘봐 근데 냐면 제가 고급 나면데 급디디 삼로담에 이미나 하장기다 간달 지가수에 간달지 사르도의 정신세는 장도 급디디산 하장기다 개발도 밥에 니주르지 매도 좀 니주르지 바지 차리 여러 삼정도 대점도 말 다다 삼담이나 드럼 이주집이 나나 삼담이미냐 디 오늘지 개발 다당 아주 차상지 상기 좀 된데 로니동 아제 간래 급리야 공리야 라렌 따르도 차상 아주 다 라렌 따르고 말라 제가 드럼 이주집이 나로래 아주 제모도 버지 다가나 상계기 급디디 아니 상말로 지 고급으로 또 낭 들이 제임이 있으니 다지 할레베 니주르지 또 차디요 나 간다 가니면에 전다 도도로 되네 다지 그바 매베기지 토바다 아니지 다는 신기 티좀사당 다가는 신기 야지 심슈차당 디 그바 매겨도 과면도 스타 아 니마 드린네 손도 봐 디주바지 가르베 아셔 그바 매버디스 토바 제과스 게면 다간도 주수기 템바도 저에 탈이야지 심구르 깨시 에너지 템바지 좀 배서도 야바체토이 총이미나 안 다가랑기 저도 시마다 다 도바디스지 골라 먹올라지 망고디스도 과스 게면도 스타데니데 슈고삼
Even today in the 21st century, the sexist views are still extremely common and very strong. And so I think that there's no need for us to mention what it was like at the time, that there was a lot of sexism at the time of the Buddha in India. Sometimes we have a tendency to take our views and our perspectives from the way, from now, and sort of assume that it was similar during the time of the Buddha. But I don't think we can do that. In the time of the Buddha, it was a different society. At that time, it was very controversial to ordain women in that particular society. It was very difficult, it was very controversial, and most people and everyone said that it was not all right that it was not acceptable to ordain women. And so I think when we look at it in this perspective, we can see that when the Buddha did not immediately allow this, when Mahaprajapati asked, she asked several times to become ordained, and the Buddha did not accept it. And it wasn't until later when Ananda asked on her behalf, on the women's behalf, and explained the reasons that he allowed it. And I think the reason is because of the societal situation of that age and that place. But in any case, he did saw the reasons and the benefits and allowed women to go forth and become ordained. And I think if we look at it in this way, the 8 respectful dharmas are based upon the societal conditions of that era. It's very clear when we look in the Vinaya. This really becomes very clear. At any case, in that particular time, he gave those who have the bodily support of a woman, he gave them the opportunity to practice the 3 trainings in their entirety. And this is something that was quite unprecedented in that time and in that society. It was amazing. It was really astonishing that he was able to do that. If we take a look back on it now and we think about it now, the fact that 2,500 years ago in that situation, the Buddha was able to do things, and people were able to practice the Buddha's teachings. There are things that people did to practice that the Buddha instituted 2,500 years ago that we are not able to do anymore. In this 21st century, the fact that we can't do everything that the Buddha taught, for his women is. That we are not able to do everything that the Buddha taught, such as give the bhikkhuni vows, is really an astonishing situation. But the main point really comes down to we don't need to have any doubts. We do not need to lose confidence about things that are unnecessary. There's no point. There is no need to do that. And so from this day on, we should make sure that we do not worry about things that are trivial and unimportant. Instead, we need to increase our enthusiasm and our inspiration to bring benefit to the teachings and sentient beings by upholding, spreading, and propagating the teachings. And I think if we do this, it'll work out well. And there's no need for us to worry about trivialities.
다디 타겐다 드버스 게임도 다 이미네 다게 가사자 드르 지시야 와 sometimes 다 건다 예 드리지 차 베시 드리지 나로 드리지 예비 인상 되지 시에비는 디즈 펜도르 시원서래서 드르 지도 스타서.
Now, of course, this is not directly connected to the ornament of precious liberation, but I thought I'd like to say it because I did find this passage in the text, and I thought it would be helpful to explain it.
다네 다바지 예리아 자들레마 손다 다디 자데 까망에 질레스다 까망아 디츠 텐션.
We've got 5 minutes till tea, so maybe we can move the hands of the clock forward.
다 대량 더더 가장 쉬운 신기 다 가수에 semgeedi kunzu chenju ki semdeya gombe dobgi gegure ma dobegi choga tsingde mazamsi geduwa mare 제사다 gombe dobgi gegu yebe indu sane gombe dobgi gegi yebe ina 원하다 초가 전에 그거 가려야res 좋아지체 다 기시 초게 끼게 예외나 곰네 가르쳐야res 다 좋아니 되지 언니 알아
Now, as I explained yesterday, when we rouse bodhicitta, we need to rouse relative bodhicitta through meditation. Just merely reciting the words of a ritual will not produce bodhicitta. It needs to be developed through meditation. And so if that's the case, then the question comes up. If you have to produce it through meditation, then what is the purpose, what is the need to have a ritual for rousing bodhicitta? So that's the first question. And then the second question that comes up is, well then, if you can arouse bodhicitta through a ritual, then why bother meditating on it?
이 격에 고유서 말해. 가시에는 격에죠. 하면 다 개봤습니다. 다들네 대야 조침비 조지반데 어디시 숨바다나 당부 로장니 다 로종사디 아주 로종사도 많고 용도아 가담발로 로종 딘디마 로종 스기에마 사도 많고 용도아 로종 다지 로종 야자사요 제가 로종 많고 용데 로 가르친 거 알았잖아 꾸준히 쌤 로정 거 알아 제가 당부 로장니 쌤게발라베 녜바 템포 중소나 되네 초게 수어 채나 야부요 알았어 드리 수어 알아 드리 주산에 초게 수어에 걸려야 인지미지 쌤게 깨바 녜전도 고메야 버지 당봉년에 쌤게 로장세 이제 쌤 깨네 템포 차소나 되네 디젤이야 되네 초가 제비나 야부요 알았어 이제 드리 수어에 인주산에 초가 제외 걸로자 앙알 게심버르지 게신 템퍼처르지 다가 그 게즘에도 게신 템퍼처 게서 가면도 가다 되지 소요 알아
Now what Lord Atisha said about this is that we first have to train our mind. And so we talk about mind training, or lojong. We talk about the 7 points of mind training, the 8 verses of training the mind. There's a collection called the 100 Mind Trainings. In any case, when we talk about training the mind, this means training the mind in relative bodhicitta. And so then when we've really trained our mind definitely and are stable in it, then if we do the ritual, then it turns out well. And so it is not that we definitely produce bodhicitta during the ritual. It's that we first train our mind, and then once the mind training has become stable, if we do the ritual at that point, it is good, according to Atisha.
지당기 생계사디 로장니 종다르체네 깨과지르 레스 이나야 초게 수원이미나 코란을 그바 미세요 알았어. 근데 semgeedi ngargeebe semgeedi 템보요하다. 다는 신기 편유의 님이 지야라서 편유의 님이다 그 저게 거는 소용 주사는 다들 편유의 님이 망부 지대야 그렇지 용으로 봐. 애들이 주산 데렐라 소베게 다 그봐 개버지 여버렸어.
And so, rousing bodhicitta comes from training the mind. We have previously trained the mind in bodhicitta, but still embracing it with the ritual or grasping it, adopting it through a ritual is also there is reason to do this. For example, it will stabilize your earlier bodhicitta, and it also will make you more aware. You'll be able to enumerate the benefits and the defects of the benefits of bodhicitta, the defects of not having bodhicitta, and so forth. So there are many different purposes for the ritual.
다 심게 초게 수화의 시행 주스다네 다 될래야 다 될래야 다다 타겐나네 숨번난 신기 다 당부 칸래 랑유 심게디 된더지 심게디 초게 수의 겁리야 다 초가 칭행기 다 가져야지 로빈스나 장도 다 초가 칭행기 캠보르드 수이나 다디 문지 저와 제자 가라랑유 사야데 다 당부디 심게디 미 칸다지 다 가져 가사 칸다지기 뉘네 아주 ane semge domba shogore saade chuwa tangode dire.
And so when we, as described in the Ornament of Precious Liberation, there is the person from whom we take the vow. So then we have the ritual, there is the master who gives us the vow, who performs the ritual, the master or the preceptor, and we need to understand what sort of a person this would be. So we need to understand, first of all, the first question we must ask is, what sort of person can we take the vow from?
Tela, babe ludubda. Tene choji ge lama changju sambada. Tene danaji choji sogi. Mönsim di khanle langwe yu gi tsini sebo sumyabja.
Now, Nagarjuna and Atisha's master, Bodhibhadra or Chanchuksamo, and various other masters did not clearly explain the characteristics or the qualifications of the person from whom one takes the vow of aspirational bodhicitta.
Yine da kadam khoman namji shebalas. Da kadam khoma diju. Da kadam khoma saade da kadam be ngarchebe ji kadam gi lama gewe shinye. Da diju gi shebaleya. Kuzu gi debal khare arsana. Di mönsim langwe yu teleya mönsim debache. Ane mönsim gi lapshala neba zamgi mishoba. Chanju sembe gi jugdum da neba, jugbe doma da neba. Tendeji gore che. Sungyo da di lo deya zu di kung juesa lo di gyar lo dale namge semge choa. Di na lo le tendeji sungyo bja cheza teleya kung jue na so sim bja. Jerum buchi je tangje kembe je zongga buchimbe baji ten ro buchi xie na yu sare sambar buchi.
However, the early Kadampa forefathers, that is, the earliest masters and spiritual friends of the Kadampa tradition, in their explanation, the person from whom we can take the vow of aspirational bodhicitta, it's not enough for them to be someone who just has aspirational bodhicitta and who dwells within and who upholds the precepts of aspirational bodhicitta. They also need to have the vow of engaged bodhicitta. Now, the source for saying this is from a ritual written by an Indian master named Dalenda. And this is also the explanation that is given by the great Tsongkhapa in his writings.
Central Kumin Zeve, da Domba Nishube, Nalo Leya, Sunyagi, Simge Langwe, Yugi, Tsini de Dang, 정주 남전에 송베게 심게 랑 유기 칭이디 다지 디데지 케바 참모점마도 베게 시제찬에도 지버를 차리 유스래.
In his 20 vows, the great master Chandragoming described the characteristics of someone from whom you take the bodhisattva vow. They are also described in the lamp for the path to enlightenment. There are slight differences, but fundamentally they are the same.
다다디 타르게 나로래야 청주 남전에 송베게 심게랑 유기 칭이디 디나라 괴나샤.
In the Ornament of Precious Liberation, what it presents are the characteristics of the preceptor as given in the lamp for the path of enlightenment.
다대양 도도 슈비미나 셈게 라위 유기 다 라맘 로변디 다 칭이르 치시르 컨데지 롱고레스나 다델야 케바다 쮸바다 뉴바섬기 유엔덴다 데바 지고레스.
And so the characteristics, to summarize, the characteristics of the Lama or the qualifications of the Lama are that they need to be learned, venerable, and capable. They need to have these three qualifications. And so this is for aspirational bodhicitta, the qualifications of the person from whom you take the aspirational bodhicitta.
윤된 숨기나 아니라 당부디 케베 윤된데 다 케베 윤된데 그러지 거라 살람 당부 지게 가르에 셈게베게 다 맹하다 당화데서마 뭐밤 당화데서마 쪼야래 케베 윤되지 바로도 언지 셈게베 초가 될래야지 케베 윤되지 되네 타마데 지 셈게 심비젤야 디 랍자다 디 치르주에서마다 냠나 치르주 자 텔라 케바여야 되지 니주고 유사.
And so there are these three qualities, and the first of them is being learned. So here in this context, what does it mean? Well, first of all, in the beginning, it means that the master is skilled or learned in giving the pith instructions or the spiritual advice in developing bodhicitta. In the middle, they need to be learned in how to give perform the ritual. And in the end, after you have developed bodhicitta, they need to be skilled. They need to be learned in upholding the precepts.
다드네 장돔 호랑 심게랑 유기다 로변 라마디 장돔 더 랑라 마냠버수아 딘디지기다지 준비해야 되나 지고라.
Now also the preceptor who gives the bodhisattva vow should be someone who has taken the bodhisattva vow and holds the precepts without any violations. And so this is the quality of being venerable.
다 뉴바사디 버지 다지 야 가세 소나디 야지 라마디기 게디 sommer 기리디 베라지 야 라마 가세 게디 시라라지 지 동바 난겐데나 동바 난겐디기 마수는 주사네 동바 나서디기 마고와 된제로 된제 가르쳐야지 이 길이 누구와 정말로 다 된제 다 간다 길이 누구와라서 봐 된제 많이 봐 심기가 너무 뭐도 봐지 오늘 내게 봐 지금 겁다 줘 동계에는지 빠지 된제지 고 알아서 뉴베에 사 된제지 겁다 줘 통해는지 된제지 뉴베에 된게는지 된제지 고유자 답변하지 바진 드레지 시야는 저거면 대사를 버지 변지 인지르지 레비나 인지 돈마지 거다 저 통해 저가다 거다 저 통해 누가야 된게 인지게 자가 눈전하야 되는 다지 개미르지 레비는 자가 돈마지 거다 저 통해 안 배버지 드레지 고만로 다 바지 드레지 고이 마다야지 지게질 벽에 더는 배 lumba 아셔야 되나 콜 거다 저 말로 주주지 해야 되나 편동만 드레지 저거로 the skill in the zero ta Quran skill in the body energy in the skill.
And so the third is the capability, or perhaps the skills, the capabilities of the Lama. And this primarily, according to some explanations, is that that the master is skilled or has language capacities, capabilities. They're able to make the vow understood, make people understand what they're saying, so that the person who is taking the vow from them will be able to understand what they're doing, and so that they will be able to understand the language. So this means that they're capable of speaking the different languages. And I think if we understand it in this way, this is what we really mean by the third characteristic, which is capability or perhaps skills, so that they're able to bring people to understand. It's like in these days, you know, if someone, if an English speaker were to come and to take the bodhisattva vow, then the master would need to be able to make them understand the bodhisattva vow. If they just spoke to them in Tibetan, no matter how long they spoke, for an hour or so, the English speaker wouldn't understand anything they're saying. So they need to be able to understand what's happening. Likewise, if a Chinese student came, they need to be able to give them the vow in Chinese, and similarly also to be able to give Tibetans the vows in languages they understand. Because if you have a foreigner come who listens to the someone speak in Tibetan for an hour, they're never going to come and gain any understanding. So here, when we talk about capability, we mean that the Lama is able to make the students understand what they're doing in the vow.
다 니버디 강게렘베 댄사다 다 돈발랭행기 가사 딜이야 다 류딘 간데시 거라서 다 로르지 주요 방아주 로 다 남베 로르지 주기 류딘 소소소 여비 인두산에 돈발랭기 가사 딜다 류딘디 간데시 거라서 사드레.
Now, the second qualification is the physical or the bodily support. What sort of body do they have? And this means, like in Buddhism, we talk about the 6 realms of sentient beings, and each of the realms have their own different types of bodily support. So, what bodily support, what physical body can the preceptor have?
다 심게 사도 게외 댄스는 다 사도 게외 그러면 다 간다 심게 로아리 주가 심게 기롱 댄스함래야 미롱아 메시제 되지 버지 송고여 버렸어.
Now, in terms of the support on which we can newly achieve bodhicitta, then actually it said you can develop bodhicitta in any of the the physical forms of any of these 6 realms. There's none where you're unable to develop bodhicitta.
다다 미데나 지 셈게베 여바데 버지 용라르 신자데 슈모고체 다 루이데레야 셈게베 여바데 마트르비 슈빈도 나로레야네 지 루 가라 두진이 동아비야 루두진이 동아비야 안나면 안도 저버서 셈게소스 지제 드레소여 브라체사 루이덴스 다 둔루르지와 제사 맞으는 율루디 둔루르지 셔가리 제사 다 디디엘라 셈게베여 지소 데네 사마동괴변 도에 나로래야 에네 제레스기 이다망보 데네 뎀발야 괴바레 송아르 스타디 뎀발라 괴바사데 케바카시기 디 뎀발라 괴바사데 엔 셈게발야 공바레 제제 데데 지시 괴인들 용디 유스레.
Now, it's well known that we can develop bodhicitta as a god or as a human. It's also said that Nagas are able to do this. In the sutra requested by Anavatapta, it talks about how 72,500 Nagas achieved enlightenment and achieved bodhicitta. So Nagas are considered animals, and so it's possible on the physical support of an animal body. Now there is also the sutra called in Tibetan, the Samatokkope Sutra, the Samatokkope Do. And in this, it describes how Avalokiteshvara brought many hungry ghosts to see the truth. In saying that they were brought to see the truth, there are some scholars who say that this should be understood as meaning that they were brought to generate in bodhicitta.
대신도 다 질렌 사벤도에 나눠려야 안 다자가 된바 ngar 다 냐외 신든 점에 개도 규르베잖아스 안 전주도 두 개가 인수하러 제자 디게 냐외 될이야 심게비여지 소임래.
And then there is another sutra, the Dhrumasamma Den Sutra in Tibetan, in which it is explained how the Buddha Shakyamuni developed bodhicitta when he had been born in the hells. And so this indicates that it's possible to develop bodhicitta in the hells.
Then da luige yasu shubin doya na la la ya then be la da lu da then miam je da nang ka ding da to chi chen bo dang then ga da gang ga lo sim ge be ge chi she do je za da di ju zen de do do she xiang da ga da ji ro ri chu ga ji sim ge be den do rong wan zhe shi ba ji ni se re ka she ge sim ge sa du ge be den do rong gu yue song do da 드린 주서 다대한 데스 계절로 데스 저버 채나 차유서 다 이내 개와스 그면도 간다라 심기 계획 된도 로아인 스타바 라샹다 서버 이내 닝바에 개와스 그면도 다 되지.
Now, in the sutra requested by the Naga king Dvaja, there is a passage that describes how all the humans, non-humans, the spirits, the Maharagas, and so forth all developed bodhicitta. And so basically, if we, to sum this up, among all of the 6 classes of samsara, all of the physical bodies there are bases on which you can develop bodhicitta. Now, there are some who say that this is developing bodhicitta for the first time. There's some debate about this, but that's not important. In any case, you can develop the bodhicitta in any of the 6 realms of samsara, whether it be newly developing it or whether it's continuing the old.
되게 류된이 쉬스면서 다 심게 사도 개와서나도 심게 계획이 심된 슈비미나 다 심게 심된데 다 군조 주민 돌레스 다 군조 따라라 말베디 군조 주민 다 군조 주민 돌레 예다 계획 철라 대주 천주 가르사 주민 철라 대요나 가르사 기부 당반남이 심게 어서 이제 쓰주하라 다 되나도 도르디 가담 고만남기 가르송도 사나 에너지게 다들이 예다 계획 철라 대규진사데 바 짬줄래야 지시견체 짬주디 에네 메도미로 규르지레스 송도아 짬주디 엔심기 계획 메도미로 규르레스 초숨이야 다 대박지 고레스 다들 송다 간다 가리니메네 심기 사도 계획이 된들이야 아니 초숨이야 대박이야 지 짬도 지 고유자.
And so that's the physical support for gathering, for developing bodhicitta. Now the mental support for developing bodhicitta newly is as described in the sutra of the the sutra of the jewels, the Talas Sungwe-do. And this, to sum it up, according to the explanation of the Kadampa masters, what it says in the sutra is that you have to have gone for refuge in the victors and in their dharma. So this basically means that you must have gone for refuge. It is going for refuge is indispensable for developing bodhicitta. Without going for refuge, you cannot develop bodhicitta. And so, in this manner, the basis for arousing bodhicitta is that you have to have gone for refuge to the three supreme ones. You must have gone for refuge to the three jewels.
단도나 semge ge da semge lengengi khasa di da lusim nige me da luden da semde nige ge chane semge ge we den ruwa di kurang ji tsini ru ji re sha da dene ngaju musim 지 초계권의 숭야래야 호랑 매바 예대바 쪼아 예대바 드니지 고예브다 다나 신기 지 면심 렘발라야 에나 코로 고스미 뉴바 예대 뉴바다 되네버지 호랑 가르쳐 되지 간다 디 면심 레야래야 호랑 처디도 예대비지다 뉴바도 차사 지 가르쳐야 좀 뉴버르지 내가 뉴버르 찾아 되는지 된대버지 되는지 고여자.
And so the first characteristic of an individual who is going to arouse bodhicitta is that they have to have an appropriate physical and mental support. In both respects, they have to have the appropriate support. Now, for the ritual on developing aspirational bodhicitta, it's also said that they need to have the longing and the enthusiasm or the consent to do this. And another aspect is that in order to adopt aspirational bodhicitta, they also have to have the capacity of their body, speech, and mind. This means that they need to be ready to do it, and they must be able to be capable of accomplishing it.
단들이야 금들이야 다지 까네르 다 까네랑도 지게면 다지 직여도 가르잖아 다 돈바 땡진 이마이사데 계주셔 봐 다들 마시네 돈바 땡진 사데 계주데 가르잖아 소소타바 리드윈 게서 아주 남전나 소소타바 리드 다도 dom신데 말이죠 좋습니다 돈바 개바 유기 현도 민사기 다 찍텔 땡세 안에 지게 가서에 다 조도 장도 죽돔을 심니다 아이나 가셔를 전수 면심을 들 거라서 다 조도 죽돔래 죽돔 톱에 땡들 인지미지 다 간다 소다리든 강론지 거래서 다지 심 소다리든 강론다 데바지 거래서 대순 거 봐. 다 될이야. 안에 지게 다 대지 통내르지 까내르지 같이 차려.
Now there's one difficult point or one matter here, a difficult matter here, and this is what is the appropriate support, whether the vow needs to have an appropriate support or not. Now, what it says in the Lamp for the Path of Enlightenment is that the person who takes the vows must have one of the 7 types of vows of individual liberation. Now, in saying that the person who takes the Bodhisattva vow has to have one of the 7 types of vows of individual liberation, this actually primarily refers to the vow of engaged bodhicitta, not to the vow of aspirational bodhicitta. And so, in order to take the vows of engaged bodhicitta, then one has to have one of the 7 different types of vows of individual liberation. And so here, this is a difficult matter or an area that needs investigation.
다 될래야 다 도도를 쉬비미나 전신 순구 나눠 뒤지 쇼도만로 삼으로도 당부디 깨와다 네베 니게 된도 무거버 되베 룩직다 다 되네 니바디 다 웃음기 개발 체네 샘잠을 로랑 예버도 그야라 우마벨 로라 무거스지제 손이 직체 다 되네 숨바들이야 깨네 니게 된도 거버 되베 룩 나바 숨 용데도.
Now here, to sort of summarize the different positions, there are basically three different positions on this. The first tradition is of those who say that the vows of individual liberation are not necessary either to develop the vows or to maintain them. The second tradition distinguishes between the middle way and the mind-only vows and says that the vows of individual liberation are necessary in the mind-only tradition, but not in the middle way tradition. And the third tradition says that the vows of individual liberation are not necessary either to develop or to maintain the vows.
다들이야 걔네 니게 된도 무거버 되었디 안에 자르기 개바 법에 아바야 까라다 얘네들이 다지 제 탐지 개바 제 정가바 첨보다 다는 신기 바지 디 까마부디 메추라게 저기 다다디 까라다 Persian Javan Jidian Sumji German Sadder. Simge Yenche Mato, the Javadi took Zomtro Lubas, Zomtro Ludevici, the Tazan Tsarioma, Troll Ludev, this Jesha. On the Tina Lole, that to someone which have a chick butter, and that you are the never nigget end of Muguba. There is
Now, the masters who say that the Pratimoksha vows are not necessary either to develop or to maintain the vows include the Indian master Abhayakara, the great Tsongkhapa, as well as the seventh Karmapa Chudagyatso, who discusses this in his commentary on Prajnaparamita called The Lamp for the Three Worlds. Now, there are some portions of this text that are missing, but it is present in but the section on bodhicitta is present. And in brief, these three masters all say that the Pratimoksha vows are not necessary for either developing or for maintaining the bodhisattva vow.
나 아바야가 투바 공개 나로 투바 공개해서 줘봐. 나 투바 공개 나로래야. 가디 소소탑에 domba 매버 쳐줬으면 domba 미기 난니스 제제다 들마 리버고에체 소소탑에 domba 매발라 안에 쳐줬으면 domba 기가 마레스 라바 이나스 제제 따마 가수에 더버고에체 또 텔리아 안에 가버도 제여브레 한 제르무스티네 티천주 숑람 나로래야 ane chidang gita shenyu shije pangwa tsamshiliya ane ji shenyu shida jeba mabana ane ji karchon shisebe domba mikiwa tsam gombara mado chidang ki sotari du tsingi ba mena shenyu domba kiga mares shije karchon chuya yo mares liso yabra.
In his treatise, The Ornament of the Buddha's Intent, Abhayakara introduces a dispute from an appointment, a dispute from an opponent. And what he says is, if without the bodhicitta, without the vow of individual liberation, bodhicitta did not arise, so he's saying if, and then presenting the opponent's position. And then he goes along to refute that at great length.
정신이 카나 마도 정신이 카나 마도 어디 마방와 이미나 안 정신을 봐 다지 토고 말해 자 잠로 공부를 마도 수수탑에 또 친이 보면 정신을 또 토고 말해지지 가서 줘 말했어.
And in his text, The Great Highway to Enlightenment, the Lord Tsongkhapa says that what it is meant is that one needs to give up the naturally unwholesome acts. And if you do not give up naturally unwholesome acts, then you cannot develop you cannot develop bodhicitta and take the vow. This is not meant to say that you have to have the actual vows of individual liberation in order to develop bodhicitta.
다 semsambelula nibadi semsambelula gore umabelula go mare swandi 다 아주 사계비 개발첨부 아니 고람바나 다가나 신기 닝메기 아주 닝마베드네 가래 아주 ngari benchen da ngari benchen domsum yorba ngari benchen domsum narole sunyebda din debati lojin tamashiri je yor din narole dinashi sunyebda.
Now the second position is that it is necessary in the mind-only tradition, but not necessary in the middle way tradition. Is described by the great Sakya scholar Gorampa, and in the Nyingma tradition it is described by the Ngari Penchen in his treatise on the 3 types of vows, and also treated in the commentary on that by Dharmashiri.
다들 리레이션 슈모가죠. 다 숨버디 걔네 니게 된도 구구레 사디. 다들 답을 타긴 나눠려야다. 답을 타긴 거다야. 아니 배당, 롱당, 아니 균생 나버 숨기고 안에. 근데 걔네 니게 된도 가서 다 된도 거버셔버 가서 된도 구구레 사지. 근데 숨어야 답을 타긴 나눠려.
And so the third position is that the vows of individual liberation are necessary both to develop and to maintain the bodhisattva vows. And this is the position described in the Ornament of Precious Liberation earlier, where it describes this both through analogies and scriptures and as well as through reasoning. And so basically here it is in the Ornament of Precious Liberation, it is saying that the vows of individual liberation are necessary to both develop and maintain the bodhisattva vows.
다디 이나야 답을 타게 나눠래 디커도 되려야 망부치 야난데지 가시지 되버듯이 디 정루인다 되박괴바점인다 디 가리인데 따지야고 제거하르지 내단을 두차리샤 마도야 지 되려야 야난데레스 망부송샤 지다디 정루 서마르다 코랑기 다보름지 코랑기 세바이엔다 아니 신기 루괴바이 내가 아주 따지 제거하지 제사 제상 아주 지단 차네 심주로 칼라칸 삼을지 제여래 다디디 시야고하스케면도 다다 심주 제사상 다다 시야샤는 선이 그규 군제가로 고소 냠당하면 차도도 그래서 제사
But at the point where it describes this in the Ornament of Precious Liberation, then this is during a section where it is presenting many different positions, and it's saying in this case, and presenting one position in this case, and it's presenting another position, or saying alternatively and presenting a position. And so the question is whether this is actually Gampopa's own position or not, and this is something that we need to look into. So saying that it's his own position means that we need to do research as to whether or not this is Gampopa's own explanation or whether it's his presentation of another tradition. So we have been researching this, and there's quite a bit that could be said about this, but they're going to be talking about it during the Kaju Gunshuk coming up, and if we speak about it all now, then they won't have anything left to say.
ane den dana singe ye gyam mi gyu do ji ge zhong gong ji changju sem ge som yin de we na lo le ya changdom sinyi be ge be yena sodar gi domba ko che bo ji di gyu la mi ge misis 아 근데 제제 소요 다 디기 야 가서 다지 다 장동 신입을 개비나 디 덴들이야 디규의 소스다도 더 먹고 싶어지 거래스 근데 소면도 삼버를 줘래
Now, in his treatise describing the single intent of the Drikungpa, the 8th Karmapa Mikyu Dorje says that in order to have an authentic bodhisattva vow, you must have an effective vow of individual liberation in your being. Without this, it is impossible to develop bodhicitta. And so, in other words, what this says is that in order to take the bodhisattva vow, you must have the effective vow of individual liberation.
난너는 도도 시위입니다. 아니 되는 안저 죽은지 된 숨근기 껴반지 된 숨근기 오골기 넘버 땡진도 되바 임배했었다. 진짜 아주 오골사든 아주 세월보다 아주 넘버 땡 제주선배 넘버 땡진도 되고요. 땡진사도 가라서나 수수탑에 그 dom백이 땡다 제바 드리진 되고요. 송이미 인두산에 버지 다보 그 유망시에 수수탑에 넘버 대버지 고유에 스타티 송과데 버지 투서디 까담발이 저 까담발 투예배 소리도 가라스나 까담 고만데 저기 다 수수타발이야 인지 민지기다 간다 급디뒤지 지속에 내당시 인기를 삼정도 간다 가리님네 수수타베 돈바텔이야 베 제대 첨부시 나한테 간다 전주선배 넘어가 슈빈다 땡엘이야 수수타베 돈바지 강로지 소다리도 강로지 먼저 저거를 제 때려야 가르쳐다 写上么许无助的全部是捐项的是多，但这样的成就咱们这个这些，什么的，他成就咱们这个这些，他成就咱们这边拿了这边提了车子，提了业务是什么的，啊，就三百全部，他工作健身说的，啊，就老种健身正经说吧，老种健身是吧的，老种健身正经的，三百全部工作健身是什么的。 말해서 군조견에서 쉬는 게서 찍어. 군조견에서도 쉬는 게서도 군조 숨긴 방식도 간다 가리면 제름 붙이 로메 대직체. 되네 롱된 시적 군식 로마레도 삼소. 롱된 시적 군식 로마체. 제름 붙이 로마 임붙체. 간다 들리지겠다. 셈바첨부. 미주 셈바첨부 쇼도. 가담베 냠네 제너 전주쌤 그 투규 배 담대바 다 투규 리버 장대바 되지 다가다 깨라침 시 중임동마 공기 가담 고마데 숭죄 창월로 초지도 뉴지 되지기다 전주람정 대신사지 저 중어봐 당안에 되지라고 톱소 공부를 집다 다 사나를 직전에 빠르 잡혀야 알아 두시게 간달 가인면에 다 디나로래야 가담 고마데 주기 숭망 붙이고야 가담 고마 폐쇄 되기 가다 전선배 돈발래야 인지미지 소스타베 돈바지 고르스 디디나 소스타베 지금 거루지 고르스 제제 십송샤 아디 롬데베기 송도다 롬데베 소나다 디원 롬게 마소라 소르지와 롬데바데 가담기 매버 인상 디지 송주산다 데 군제 숨디지 마시라시르지 바지 인사라 인주산 드립시샤
And so the basic point is that the Drikung master, the Jitun Sungon, said in his original text, the single intent, he said, we assert that the vow must have a basis. And so saying we assert, meaning we, the Drikung Kajus, assert that that the vows must have the basis of the vow of individual liberation. And so in this way, actually most masters of the Dakpo Kaju school say that you must have one of the vows of individual liberation in order to take the bodhisattva vows. And I think the reason why they say this is because it comes down to the Kadampa masters. The forefathers of the Kadampa school really stressed the need to take the vows of individual liberation. And I think this is a reaction to the social situation of their time. But they really treasured and valued the vows of individual liberation very highly. And they said that before you could take the bodhisattva vow, before you take the bodhisattva vow, you first have to have any one of the vows of individual liberation. In fact, if we say it in a less respectful way, they were very insistent that you had to have the vows of individual liberation. There is a text there's a commentary on the Lamp for the Path of Enlightenment called the Great Commentary on the Lamp for the Path of Enlightenment. This is the longest of all the commentaries on the Lamp for the Path for Enlightenment. It was written by a master named Kunchuk Gyatsen, who also collected the 100 types of mind training and so forth. He was known by various different names, Shunu Gyatsen, Kunchuk Bang, and so forth. He was a student of Tsongkhampa, as well as a student of Rongtunpa. And at any rate, he was known as being a great master who had really trained his mind very thoroughly through the methods of the practices.
Great bodhisattva.
He was recognized as a great bodhisattva who had trained his mind. Okay, so he was actually called the great bodhisattva in recognition of how well he had trained his mind in the practices of the Kadampa mind training school, in the Kadampa school mind training. In any case, in his great commentary on the Lamp for the Path of Enlightenment, he combined many different Kadampa many of the old Kadampa instructions into this, and I was able to find a copy of it. It's a rather rare text. I do hope that we are able to print it in the next year. In any case, it contains many different instructions from the great...
Next year, the next Tibetan year.
The next year, yes. In any case, in all of the citations from the Kadampa masters, it says that in order to develop bodhicitta, one first has to have any one of the vows of individual liberation. And I think the source for this is Drontumpa. Now, Drontumpa, of course, was the forefather of the Kadampa tradition. So once he asserted this, then of course all of his followers had to assert the same position.
Shandabungombi chulu sayati. Shandabungombi chulu sayati kandajire sana. Tadi thambu susu tabe domba chi le. Tadi ne ya di jela chanshu sembe domba le yunju sana. Susu tabe domba sungu marasta. Susu tabe domba ne yunju ne. Chanshu sembe domba chaso re. Chanshu sembe domba mada susu tabe domba sungu maras. Tadi jela sanga domba chi. Sanga domba chi wata susu tabe domba sungu mara. Chanshu sembe domba sungu mara. Sanga domba cha sares, ta domba di ne njurni. Sanga domba cha sare. Ta sanga domba cha kar jeje res ta. Kar jeje somar ta sanga nan ba chi yorwa, chi jorwa da jowa se de mongu yorwa. Ta di so kar chore sanga ne sheba ne ji che shana ta ko gyens ke yamar jeje. Dinde ji chulu ji chumare. Je de du san pele ya ji be ta ji chue de be kanju men jo cha ji. Chue be 가서다지 건조먼조를 샤도 중벌에 재산 까담버디 수익이 배 딘데지 조지 덴제 휴제 벽이 상기기 때문에 다 데려 좀 지에네 가르가서 노르와도 봐 매면서 양다바도 야베 주든데 chen 조지 되는 쇼가 좀 새로 찍대 차대요 알아 제산 좀되면 디수기 다들이야 갑자기 지조 내가 이제 인사 전주 남주가 나로래 다디지 상하시라 소요 말데 다나 신기 베라지 소소 타바 고고레 소소 타바 쓴 게셔보레 소소 타바 리딩기 마버지 송 다디 워드바 상하 커도도 레두스타네 아직 가시 송 대시에 먹어시 다가다 디네 망고 송제 송과 김젠데 갑디 지조 내다로 두스 차대 요래 이제 마시 까담바디 데지 상하라 다 당보스케 말해 그래서 당보스케지만 다가다 고란 당보 고주 연dü네 데 상하 갑디도 상하도 근중문 주지 냠네 제대기 예배 인상 텔이야 까담바디도 투니에버시라요 말해 그래서 상하라 데지 가서 구독본르지 상하 냠네 지하로 구독보지 지단게 까담비 기세 망보 꼬라 상하 냠네 지기어스도 다이네야 튜문가 나올라 지 미요한다보다 아니지 지준드마다보다 덴덴드마다 지기 당아주지 콜로 뎀져서 여러분 다들 담으면서 다니는데 냠네 지기에 넘주로 시다 땡겨 말아요. 꼬는 냠네 지대기 있어요. 이 대지 맛이 될 중지시야. 더 중지시야.
And so the situation, the social situation at that time, perhaps you all know, is that was a time when there was a lot of false dharma spreading in Tibet, or incorrect dharma teachings. It was a time of the tradition of what's called the blue-robed tradition. This is a tradition.
Blue-robed Pandita tradition.
The tradition of the blue-robed Pandita, and in this tradition, they say that first you take the vows of individual liberation. And later you take the bodhisattva vow. And when you take the bodhisattva vow, the vow of individual liberation is transformed into the bodhisattva vow, so you no longer have to keep the precepts of the vow of individual liberation because they've been transformed into the bodhisattva vow. Then later you take the secret mantra vow, and then once you've done that, you don't have to keep the vows of the vows of individual liberation or the bodhisattva vow, because they've been transformed into the secret mantra vow, and they thought that the secret mantra vows meant that you could do whatever you liked, and so the reason they thought this is now, of course, there's a lot of discussion in the secret mantra about joining and liberation and so forth. And if you're doing it as actually taught in the secret mantra Vajrayana, there's no problem with it. But in that situation, there are many people who are doing various different things and saying it was Dharma. And so this is probably the reason why the Kadampa masters invited Atisha in the first place. It was why he was brought to...
No, Tibetan.
Excuse me. Why the Tibetan masters invited Atisha to Tibet in order to rectify the situation with Tibetan teachings, to correct the teachings. And so this is a primary reason for inviting Atisha. This is why John Tumpa and so forth really valued the vows. And they spoke about it, and so they spoke about the need to keep the vows of individual liberation quite a bit. For example, in the Lamp for the Path of Enlightenment, it does not say much about the secret mantra vows at all. But it does talk about how necessary it is to keep the vows of individual liberation. It does speak about this at length, and it does mention a bit about this later when talking about the secret mantra as well. And so I think the reason for this comes down to the social context in which this happened. This is a time, and because of the social context, the Kadampa masters were, you could say maybe that they were a little strict with their practice of the secret mantra, or maybe not that they're so strict, but rather they're a little bit more limited in their practice, because at that point there are many people who thought that practicing the secret mantra meant that you could do whatever you like. And so the Kadampa masters actually were more strict in their practice. Actually, the Kadampa masters themselves did the practices of the secret mantrayana, but they did it in private. In public, they would talk about doing practices such as achala and tara. But in private, they would also do practices, and they wouldn't demonstrate or show anyone that they were doing practices such as chakra samvara. They kept those practices private.
umade kadambi chakse penaji narthangi chakse do narthandi kadambi dance da dance chasar jirwa kirashim jirwa tizugi lusele chage changwalo be sengo wala chegodo mig thonga me chebe sengo wala chage che 비비게 가서다지 긴사를 주스로 비게지 제 나한테 사는 전에 위치에 따대도 선서를 정말 가다 생고를 제고 있어 나탕 착시 제고를 했어도 침침배들이 제고를 했어.
Like in the Kadampa great master, in the customs, the ritual customs from the great monastery of Narthang, which is one of the largest Kadampa monasteries, their tradition was that when you did mudras, you had to do them underneath your robes, underneath your ascents, so that people wouldn't be able to see them. So it must have looked kind of strange. These days, if we saw someone doing it, we'd think that they're sending instant messages. At any rate, this is described by the great Chim.
Kada 성부다 나타한디니 다 벽이 오늘에는 지 개변 중에를 시다 벽이 나렌저데 성부체 벽이 밀그라마 실라데 바지에드네 나타한 이사라서 말을 도와 다가다 섬기 미겨봐 가다를 벽이 지 오늘 시변 중에 다 개변 중에를 시다 차디가래.
Now, Sangpo and Narthang monasteries are really the wellsprings of Tibetan scholars and masters. You could say that Sangpo monastery is like a Tibetan Nalanda, and that Narthang monastery was like a Tibetan Vikramashila. In any case, these two monasteries were like the wellsprings of Tibetan scholarship and Tibetan masters.
다들 중대 가라산다 그 중대 시기 있을라다 중대 가라사나 리중바데 리중바데 지단전에 칼을 좀 시다나요 맞다 간다 지주밀레베기 까 팅숨 장에서 봐. 까 렌숨 장에서 마지에서나데 마 칼라 많이 까 렌숨 장에서 이나 지주밀레베디 답에 세상에서 공배 시가 야고 싶도 민도 좀 봐서 시가 야고 공 시다라 공부서 시다라 하면다 마르반데 있는데 칼라 가부 찾았다 밀레베 칼라 가부 찾았다 제가 콘팅질이야 까담베 공부질이야 침비를 까담베 공부질이야 치네 까담베 공부질도 잡아도 소소도 유스러 봐 소소도 유스단 딱공 만자지 이라삼 그 자동으로 만자라 깔아 하고 있어 공 만자 이라삼 뒤 지슈데 되대 까담 잡아 소리 뒤 지슈 될 되대 유스다 근데 잡아지요 저 어다 아주 내 잡아도 소요 알았어 라카르 루큐르 추구 말았어 라카보 양 코란 도가 카보 인자 루기 텔야 junru라다 이나 라카보디 교랑 라르마도 룩 말았어 제사 다 교랑데 대초 말았어 마비샤로 마비니 고 괴치럴 때 공기 시합디 공기다 세서 마시는 공 강바죠 봐 뒤치럴 마된 거 고잡 강바질 괴버루라 강바질이라 강바질이잖아 나는 양 구르당 나서 양공 구르당 좀 구르망 보시다면 루기세 양공지 다 구르당 주산 다디 기시 제유에 세마레스 기시 제유에 센 기시 제유에 꼬려야 수르도 네 콘려야베 되는지 라마테네 지 최로 쉬레스 그냥 꼬도마다 양면서 되게 제조만다 기시 제유에 데 어다 공원에 내주르버지래도 호스 공 가르쳐라다 나서다는 주산 공기 딱 간다 양한테 우르다한지 그런 게 급지 주산에 진짜 제별로 주셔야 해 제가 되게 지단 그 내주르 봤어요 뭐라 다지 가담바디 지 럽도 중화당 데리아 메버치 자침부지데 내주르버시다 가마 내주르버시다 돈이 보여 내주르바단 지거바다 지사르진다 지 응악바다 지세르바 ngakbata yogi dance that the kadamati to gamma. Karasana Tagana sing Taburum Namtana yard, Taburum Uma Katambe, Chasaliash, Basic Sinishu de Colia. And a Gonda Tabarishi that Gibuch Leon, Rek out when they go, Gibuch Len. Gibuch Len, and Casual de Gibuch Leon, we have the Milam Yana and Chorwa. That Kongi Churro, some Kongo Trobotis, some Churro Solia, kids, Martin de Milam Dusel, Sundwa. Or that the Kuran rubbed the Chuachi. Nenjurba Milamta to Joshua. Nenjurba Milamta to Joshua. Gangong never is. The Kuran and Jimmy Mew one sugar, Mew one shoe. The nation, Nenjoba or church. Nenjoba marriage matter, Nenjoba searching, Nenjoba church. Do you think it's here? That is Nenjoba in Yushan, just Milay. Jazan cup to do the Nenjoba, the Yogi, the Ngakba, the just said Solia, got them but 2 years shy, Mebra. That maybe you send it up, Umadi, consumer cheddar, Gogmara, the consumer cheddar, Gogmara.
And so there's a story here, and the story is about Rechungpa. And actually Rechungpa was rather headstrong and disobedient. There are stories about how he was disobeyed Milarepa 3 times. So Milarepa was actually kind of had a genial, to say it in a not so respectful. He had a rather genial character and was not easily offended. If Rechungpa had done this to Marpa, then he would have been finished. But at any case, one day he went to a Kadampa monastery, and they were having a puja in the monastery. And so in the puja, there was a space at the end of the line, and so Rechungpa thought to himself, if I sit there, maybe I'll get a little bit of tea. And so he sat down in the row with the monks. And then a monk came, one of the Kadampa monks came to him and said, "What are you doing sitting here? How can you have one white goat in the middle of all the yellow sheep? You have to get out of here," and try to kick him out. And Rechungpa was very disobedient and headstrong about this, and he refused to go. And he sang a song at this point. He sang a song of...
he lost something. Before he went outside, they closed the door. Feet.
Okay, so and as they were kicking him out, they threw him out. They closed the door, but his feet got stuck inside, and so he sang the song while his feet were sticking inside the monastery. Now, inside the monastery, there was actually a master named Chayula, and Chayula was a Kadampa master, but he was also a hidden or private yogi, and had studied with Rechungpa. So he was a yogi, but he did not show this. And so actually with the Kadampa masters, they didn't like yogis. They didn't particularly like having yogis or tantric practitioners, what we'd call today ngakpas. They didn't really like them. We can also see this in the life story of Gampopa. When Gampopa first studied at a large Kadampa monastery, and when he was studying there, every night he would have the same dream, that there would be this old man in a white robe who would come to him in his dreams. And so when he talked to his Dharma brothers and his Dharma friends about it, they all said, "Oh, you're a monk. This is a bad dream. Dreaming about yogis is a bad thing. You better go have an empowerment of achala so that you can stop having these dreams." And so he went and had the empowerment of achala, but after the empowerment, the appearances of the yogi got clearer and clearer and stronger and stronger. And so this is really, it just shows how much the Kadampa tradition distrusted and disliked yogis and ngakpas at that time. And so I think this is related to these reasons.